Imagine you're a detective investigating a 2,000-year-old cold case. Your only evidence, 4 accounts written decades after the events by people who weren't eyewitnesses, each telling the story slightly differently. Would you read these documents the same way you'd read them in church on Sunday morning? This challenge faces every historian working with the New Testament, and the answer reveals two fundamentally different ways to read any ancient religious text. Here's the problem. The New Testament is essentially our only source for the earliest decades of Christianity. For Jesus, we have 4 canonical Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, plus possibly the Gospel of Thomas. For Paul, only his New Testament letters are considered reliable. 2nd-century documents about Paul, like the Acts of Paul, are historically suspect. This scarcity makes how we read these texts critically important. Two distinct approaches have emerged. Theological reading treats texts as sacred scripture. It assumes divine inspiration and reads for spiritual truths, doctrine, and guidance. The text carries authority because of its sacred origin. Historical reading treats the same texts as ordinary ancient documents. It assumes nothing about divine origin and reads for recoverable historical data. The text gets the same scrutiny as Herodotus or Tacitus. Same text, different questions, different methods, neither inherently superior. A historian reading the Gospel of Mark asks, "What can I reliably know happened?" A theologian reading the same text asks, "What is God revealing through this story?" The historian seeks to reconstruct events. The theologian seeks to understand meaning. Both are legitimate intellectual projects, but mixing them up creates confusion. Knowing which question you're asking determines what kind of answer makes sense. Historical criticism applies specific analytical tools to ancient texts. Scholars examine internal consistency. Do the accounts agree with each other? They analyze chronological details. Do timelines match? They evaluate reliability. What biases might the author have? They search for corroborating sources. This isn't cynicism, it's analytical suspicion. Rigorous questioning applied to all ancient documents, not just biblical texts. When historians study Roman emperors or Greek philosophers, they use identical methods, and the Bible receives the same treatment, not special skepticism. Watch how this works with the resurrection accounts. Who discovered the empty tomb? Matthew says Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. Mark says Mary Magdalene, Mary mother of James, and Salome. Luke says Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary mother of James, and others. John says Mary Magdalene alone. A historian notes these discrepancies and asks what they reveal about each author's sources and purposes. A theologian might see complementary perspectives, different witnesses contributing to a fuller picture of the same event, right? What? The temple cleansing offers another example. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus cleanses the temple during his final week in Jerusalem. In John, it happens at the beginning of his ministry, 3 years earlier. Historians ask, which timing is accurate? Did it happen twice? Is one author rearranging events for theological purposes? Theologians might focus instead on what the event reveals about Jesus' mission, regardless of precise timing. 3 misconceptions derail these conversations. First, historical reading isn't anti-religious. Many devout scholars use historical criticism. The method examines evidence. It doesn't dictate conclusions about faith. Second, theological reading isn't fact denial. Theologians can acknowledge historical complexity while prioritizing spiritual meaning. Third, the approaches don't always conflict, right? Then they often focus on different aspects entirely. Conflict arises when people mistake one type of claim for the other. Many scholars hold both approaches simultaneously. They might conclude historically, we cannot verify this detail with certainty. And theologically, The spiritual truth doesn't depend on historical precision. These aren't contradictory statements. They're answers to different questions. Historians, we don't know, and the theologians, this reveals truths can coexist because they're measuring different things with different tools for different purposes. When you encounter biblical scholarship, ask one question. Is this a historical or theological claim? Recognize that debates often stem from people using different methodologies without realizing it. Someone making a historical argument and someone making a theological argument may talk past each other entirely. Understanding this distinction doesn't diminish faith or scholarship. It clarifies what kind of question you're asking and what kind of answer you should expect.